feel me now, yeah? Okay, brilliant. Okay, welcome to an Elizabethan thematic timeline. So this is a timeline by ideas. This bit's actually chronological, and this bit is more kind of ideas focused here. So it's visual, and it's by me, Mr. Mack-Poole, and this is me on Twitter, at VikingPoet84. Please follow, retweet. I want to be Twitter famous in the teaching world. Right, okay, right, so, and of course help you with your GCSE history. And please forgive the eyes got really bad hay fever today. So when we look at Elizabethan history, really we look at the problems with her accession, her coming to the throne. So Elizabeth is kind of stained by a couple of things, and just let me elaborate there. So Elizabeth is actually deemed illegitimate by many people in her own kingdom, especially the Catholics in the north. They call her bastard queen. Now it's best in your exam just to say that they said that she was illegitimate, and they use that as an insult. Now, a very interesting thing about Elizabeth is probably why we teach her, is that she breaks all the rules. She was expected to be married, and the king would rule England, much like her older sister, who was Bloody Mary, or Mary Tudor, Mary I. But she breaks the rules. She doesn't marry, and even though she's 25, she's headstrong, she's intelligent, she wants to rule her nation herself. Now, she has an enemy. This is the early French threat. This is Mary of Guise. Now, Mary of Guise is a very interesting woman. She has this Catholic vision that Scotland, France and England will all become like one big Catholic superstate, and with her child, who is Mary, Queen of Scots, to be actually at the head of that. So she has these early threats, but she meets each of these threats head on. She kind of airbrushes her mum out of history. She never marries, but flirts around with the idea of marriage when it suits her. She actually raises an army to go to Leith, because there are 9,000 French troops there. And even though it isn't a favourable battle, at least she showed some action. And actually, Mary of Guise dies. Now, whether she was poisoned by Sir Francis Walsingham, which is a historical rumour, or she just dies of natural causes, we don't know. But it's interesting to think that the spy master would have had such an impact so early on. Now, she has a problem with religion. So this is a major issue. Okay, it's called the religious settlement. So she passed 2 acts to deal with this. Now, the problem at the time is that actually Catholics and Protestants just can't get on. Now, you need to know something about the Reformation to understand that. So if you don't know anything about the Reformation, please pause the video. Why would you start playing? You paused it, yeah?
Yep, it's gone now.
Right, okay, right. So, sorry, some of my students just interrupted, which was very annoying. So yeah, the religious settlement. So the religious settlement, basically, there's a problem around religion. It's the Reformation. So a man called Martin Luther read the Bible, and he said the Catholic Church was doing things incorrectly. So he went and nailed his 95 problems onto a church door, and this caused massive reverberations. It divided Europe, and it divided England. And so Elizabeth tries to kind of heal this rift. I mean, her older sister, who's known as Bloody Mary, is known for a reason. It's because of the Marian persecutions, where she burned 300 Protestants at the stake for their beliefs. Now, Elizabeth's actually a lot more fair-minded. She passes the Act of Uniformity, one thing altogether. And in that uniform act, she says, okay, go to the Church of England, and if you don't go, I'm not going to burn you, I'll fine you. Many Catholics do choose to do this, and they become recusants. She also passes the Act of Supremacy, and this means that she's actually the supreme head of the Church. And for Catholics, it's a bit of an insult, because the Pope is the head of the Church. So this puts her out of favour with the Pope, but that kind of comes later. So, now, let's talk about the later, the Catholic and Puritan challenge. So you've got Pope Pius V there, and Pope Pius V, what he actually does, he excommunicates, he expels Elizabeth from the Catholic Church. He sends John Ballard, a Jesuit, to England with a papal bull, which is called Reigning on High, and basically says, you can't be loyal to both the Queen and myself. If you're loyal to the Queen, you're also excommunicated. And I give permission to anyone, basically, to kill her, really, is fundamentally what he says. He doesn't word it like that. But anyone who martyrs themselves in the Catholic religion would go straight to heaven if they assassinated her. So, really, it's a big enemy that she's made there. I mean, the Pope, for me, is one of the most powerful men in the world. There are many kings, but there's only one Pope. And the Catholic religion is obviously massive across Europe. And then we've got John Fox. John Fox is an English Puritan, and he stirs up trouble during Elizabeth's reign. He's very angry with Catholics for what they did to Protestants in Bloody Mary, Mary Tudor, Elizabeth's half-sister's reign. So he's very angry about that. So he writes a book, and it's called John Fox's Book of Martyrs, and it's basically all on those burnings and those persecutions there. And so he whips up kind of Catholic hatred in Elizabeth's reign. Okay, so now let's get to the real rivalry, the problem of Mary Queen of Scots. Now really, I've put a link here, you'll see a link coming on here, but Mary Queen of Scots tried to claim the English throne when Elizabeth came to power. The problem of Mary Queen of Scots goes into plots, but really, for the entirety of this course, really, from 1558 to 1587, Mary Queen of Scots is a thorn in Elizabeth's side. And why is this? Well, she's a rival claimant for the throne, she's fertile, she marries. I mean, these two are like chalk and cheese. Elizabeth is the Virgin Queen. Well, Mary Queen of Scots marries 3 times for love and lust. Okay, she marries unwisely, and which is a part of her undoing. But you know, from the beginning of Elizabeth's reign in 1558, where she tries to claim the throne, to 1587, which is Mary Queen of Scots' eventual execution, she proves to be the thorn in Elizabeth's side. And let's not forget the religious divide. Mary Queen of Scots is a ardent Catholic, and Elizabeth is, of course, a Protestant. Right, okay, so rising of the North. Let's go into plots, revolts in Spain. 1569, so Thomas Percy, Earl of Northumberland. I mean, it's also known as the rise of the Northern Earls, and there's another Earl, but I couldn't fit him on this pictogram. His name's Charles Neville, and he's the Earl of Westmoreland. So it's also known as the rise of the Northern Earls. This fails, okay? It really, really fails. So it fails because the Protestant armies in England are far larger, and also they should have waited because the excommunication from Pope Pius V actually comes in 1570. So that if they'd waited for the excommunication, perhaps they could have got more Catholics in the north to rebel against Elizabeth. So we get these, once this fails, Catholics in England, and especially in the north, because there's a north-south divide in terms of religion, they decide, let's go for a different tactic. So they decide to go for 3 different plots. Okay, so you've got the Rodolphi plot in 1571, fails because the banker's got a big mouth. You've got the Throckmorton plot and the Babington plot, which is the last plot which Mary Queen of Scots was implicated in. It's also the most interesting plot for me because it's also known as the casket barrel plot. In bottles of ale, secret codified messages were put in the barrels, and Sir Francis Walsingham got a mathematician to crack these codes, this cipher, and he revealed her treason to the Queen, which is why she was executed. Sir Francis Walsingham himself is a figure which makes a colossal, major impact on Elizabeth's reign. He's her most trusted right-hand man as a spy master, and what he does, he gets these Catholic plots which have one thing in common, which is to get Mary Queen of Scots on the throne. He uncovers these plots and protects Elizabeth. And really, you know, Mary Queen of Scots, you know, fleeing Scotland because of her failed marriage, where she had a second husband killed by her third husband. All this chaos which she brings. Well, when she comes to England, she's put under house arrest. She hates being under house arrest, and that kind of would explain her role in these plots. But at the very least, she was a figurehead which inspired Catholic revolt, which gave Elizabeth a real problem. What would she do with Mary Queen of Scots? She was a real problem. So now relations with Spain take a right dip, and the reason for this is because of a proxy war. Now, a proxy war is where 2 more powerful nations will fight each other for influence within another nation, and that other nation is the Spanish Netherlands, which King Philip II of Spain reigns over. Now, King Philip II of Spain is one of the most powerful in the world. He's got a massive empire in South America. He owns the Netherlands and parts of Italy and Portugal as well. So he's a Habsburg, and basically his family have kind of inbred themselves all through royal family. So he's inherited all this kind of territory across Europe, which makes him very rich and powerful. And then we've got the Spanish Armada. Now, as a consequence of these poor relations with Spain, with this proxy war in the Netherlands, which Queen Elizabeth sends her lover boy, Robert Dudley, out there with lots of silver florins and troops to support the Dutch rebels, and as a consequence of, well, just English privateering. I mean, Sir Francis Drake, who we're going to talk about later, he just robbed up the Spanish Empire, basically. So there's a battle for naval supremacy, which is kind of at the heart of these poor relations with Spain, as well as the religious divide. Obviously, don't forget that King Philip II was a Catholic, and actually he proposed to Elizabeth early in her reign, and she rejected that. So that could be a possible factor in these poor relations there. Now, moving on to something which is slightly more thematical, you also need to think about education, leisure, and the poor. So you need to look at the reasons for the increase in poverty and vagabondage. There's a lot of begging due to poor harvests during these years. And also, a lot of farmers moved on from farming wheat to farming sheep because they thought it was more profitable. Of course, this increased the price of wheat. So, as well as the poor harvest, what you have is an increasing price of bread, which obviously harms the peasantry there. You need to think about the sports and pastimes which the Elizabethans indulged in, including bear baiting, and obviously you'd have like some early Shakespeare plays there, and schooling. And sorry, King Philip II's name just come up there. But anyway, right, schooling. So education was mainly for the rich, and it was extremely religious. But literacy levels had increased due to the advent of the printing press, which does make a big impact on Elizabethan history. And just to talk about the printing press, I mean, we usually think about it in terms of medicine, but the printing press causes the Reformation. The Reformation leads to the whole politics of this Elizabethan era, this Catholic versus Protestant ethos and dynamic. I mean, you can trace that right back to the printing press, really, and see it as a consequence of that. Okay, now moving on to the reason and significance for Drake's circumnavigation. Now, circumnavigation, circum means circle, navigation means find your way. So Sir Francis Drake is such a critical and interesting figure. He's the first Englishman to circumnavigate the world in 1577. He wasn't the first man to do it. Actually, a Portuguese named Magellan actually did it before him and went through the Magellan Strait and took a little shortcut through South America there. But when Drake goes exploring all across the world, he goes up the Spanish coast and he just robs and robs and robs silver and gold from that, and creates very poor relations. This is in 1577. So you can see this as a kind of a long-term early cause for the Spanish Armada in 1588. And also, Drake really develops his naval skill here. Drake is also a key figure in the Spanish Armada because he leads the raid on the port of Cadiz. I mean, the Spanish Armada just needs a whole session by itself. But obviously, it's a colossal defeat for the Spanish, and it's a great win for Elizabeth, and leads the way to the Golden Age and kind of England's ascendancy to be a major world power. So, exploration of the New World. So now you would have heard of Sir Francis Drake, and you probably heard of Sir Walter Raleigh. So Sir Walter Raleigh leads this expedition to the New World. So Spain's got this tremendous empire, which makes them a lot of money, and so he attempts to colonise Virginia. Now, Raleigh doesn't go there himself, but this is a massive failure because he thinks he's taken some lords to go and find some gold. In fact, what they find is a kind of hostile Native American population, and all that's there is farming, and these rich lords didn't go to find the New World for farming. So it fails, and there's this really mysterious thing with on Roanoke Island where the words Croatan were written into a tree, and all that was found was some arrows in a skeleton. So it didn't end very well for them. But all in all, this is a very interesting course, and the politics and machinations and the religion, and the personalities, I think it's very exciting. And the Spanish Armada, I mean, that's just some great history. I mean, just to talk about that quickly, its failure leads to because of the poor crescent formation, and because of the Marquis de Santa Cruz dying and being replaced with a leader who had no naval expertise. The fact that that wasn't Britain, it was England. The English Navy used smaller ships but could fire greater volleys of cannon fire, and the outdated methods the Spanish used, really, it was only ever going to go one way. It was a failure. But never forget that the massive role of chance in the Spanish Armada that comes into this, the great storm that just swept away the Spanish Armada. And I think the quote is that God breathed and they were scattered. And that's the way that Elizabeth saw it, that God favoured Protestant England and not Catholic Spain.